it's gone.
says, do not post this video.
Something, well, don't post this, because then you, like that's what we did today by streaming
Gotcha.
without posting it or whatever,
Yep. Yeah, then you can just,
play around.
yeah. I don't even know what virtual camera is, but it's never played with it enough. We don't have headlines, so there's a thought.
All the school kids are sitting in the back, so you might have to yell.
I see that. Yeah.
Way in the back.
Ho, ho, ho. Look at that. We got the best of both worlds working. It's all right. There. Look at that. Then we do this. There you are. There we go. I'm convinced there's a thin but definite line between self-examination, self-understanding, and self-absorption. Someone can be self-absorbed, which is different, I think, legitimately, than someone who is self-examines. The old Greeks said there's the unexamined life is not worth living, and I think the line is that self-examination tells you the truth, where self-absorption often is a part of you're deluded about who you are. And I had one of those moments of self-examination and I think clarity a little while ago, and I don't see this to be self-effacing, but it was just one of those little moments that I realized I'm not so much a teacher as I'm an explorer. I love to explore, and I find cool enough stuff I want to share. It's like when you go on holidays and you go, we were down in Nicosalvia or wherever, right? And we brought back this cool stuff, and you got to see this, right? And my whole life, I've turned over rocks. When I was 5 years old, we lived in Swift Current in the North Park. Like when you come off the highway, there's the old school, I think, with the Irwin or whatever it was. And we lived on a big house there. And my parents caught me just about downtown. Because I was just exploring, go for a walk, right? And they were in a big panic because that's a fair long ways for 5 years old. And I've always been that way, turning over rocks, going around corners, and it's just I love to find out what's over there, or what's under there, or what's around there, or what's beyond there. And I think that just comes as so when I read scripture, I'm just what's under there, what's around there, what's over there, and I explore it, and I think this is so cool. I got to share it with you, right? So I don't know if I'm a teacher or an explorer. There's a very weird movie called A Mighty Wind, and Mitch Cohen says, yeah. It's a folk music. There's a mighty wind. And he's ready just before he's about to go on stage. Mitch says, I feel ready for whatever the experience is that we will take us after the show. I'm sure it'll be an adventure, a voyage, a magnificent vessel into uncharted waters. What if we see sailfish jumping and flying across the magnificent orb of the setting sun? And just, it's Eugene Levy, and he's just this sense of, what if we see sailfish? So I think this idea of exploration is critical to us, and I think we approach exploration for different reasons. We approach travel. Shishinga, you're going traveling. Why are you going traveling? Exactly, to see family, right? Now, if I was to go to England, that is not why I would go to England, to see your family, right? I would go to. So why do you travel? Why do you explore? Or do you?
That's about the only reason. Go to see somebody, or somebody's dying, or somebody's getting married, or somebody's had a baby.
So highly relational exploration. Good. What? Yeah. Why else do you travel and explore? Get out of the cold, go somewhere warm. Yeah, or for work. Good. What else?
Just to see different parts of the world. And
Yeah, just to see different, right? I thought about this line. I never went anywhere to understand a place, just to see it. But when I saw it, I understood my place. I like that. I never went to a place to understand it, just to see it. But when I saw it, I understood my place. And you kind of see how you fit in, right? Well, you go to see family, right? You understood, we begin to understand our place in our family. Or we go to see a greater part of the world. We go to understand, we go, oh, this is my place in the world. And we understand, by exploring, we understand a part of ourselves, although that may not be the reason we go exploring, but it certainly is a byproduct of or a benefit of exploring. So as we come to scripture, I think about ourselves as explorers of Scripture. And sometimes we explore the vistas. We want the big story of God at work. And a lot of times now we talk about the big story of the Bible. Uh, Sometimes we go to find those great moments of depth. We study one word, the difference between the God and a God. It's a significant difference, but all found in a single word. Or we attempt to find truths that reflect and teach us and train us and equip us in righteousness and all those wonderful things. Or we get the heights of it. So let me ask you, why do you explore Scripture?
Yeah.
To find the depths of it. Good. What else?
Truth.
To find the truth. Good. In a world of lie and confusion, we want the purity of its truth. Good. And Jesus said the truth sets us free. Good. Yes, for comfort. Oftentimes we turn to Scripture in the midst of difficult seasons, and we find therein a comfort. Very good.
Conviction.
For conviction, right? There are times when we want it to correct us, and that training, right? I want to know when I'm wrong, so that I can have life, right? I want to know where the chains are, where the bondage is, so that I can be set free. I'll elaborate if that's what you mean, Ethan. I hope you just don't enjoy feeling convicted. That's kind of a dark thought. I just like feeling sad, and I really do this. Yeah.
It's positive.
There's a fascinating element about it. Absolutely. It's the joy of exploration and discovery.
I think it's possibly a natural outflow of the love that we have for God, understanding who He is, what He did for us. We want
Absolutely.
to know Him.
Yeah.
And this is how we can know Him and spend time in His Word, understand who He is, and how He operates. Learning.
You learn it. Exactly, Harlan. Yeah, yeah. The more we love something, the more we want to know about it. Whatever your interest or hobby is, right? And it's fun when you meet somebody else who loves something like crazy. I was working in a vehicle with a guy one time, and he's like super into golf. And there's this picture on Sports Illustrated with Tiger Woods doing this amazing shot. And if you look in the rows of the fans, he's in the picture. And his wife one time said, "Can I come with you on your golf?" He said, "We get up in the morning, we golf 18 holes, we go home, we have supper, we sleep, and we get up at 6 the next morning and go golf eight for." He said, "If you want to come, you're more than welcome." She said, "I don't want to go." But but by the time he was done, I wanted to golf. Now, I don't want to golf, but I was so engaged with it. It's like going with Shane to a gun show. You just want to buy something when you're done, right? Because you're like, oh, this is so cool. Um, he's a bad influence on me. Yes, that's why I have a golf bag, so I can smuggle guns in the house. So Donna just thinks he's coming and go with his golf bag.
Golfing expensive.
Yeah, golfing got really expensive all of a sudden. It's expensive enough. Good. I think we all have our own reason. And the reason is changes. Sometimes it is for comfort. Sometimes it's curiosity. It's never a constant. Uh, it's this myriad of ideas, and so we look at it. Sometimes we study it, historically, culturally, that way. Sometimes we study it purely as the Spirit takes that word and massages our soul or convicts our soul with it. I think we come to it for a myriad. But with that, when we sit down and read a story, we're like explorers. We approach it at different moments of our life. Sometimes we approach it for the sheer interest in the story. Sometimes we approach the story for comfort in the story. There's different reasons and different ways at different seasons why we approach the story. So before we get into our next study, which is going to be the book of Colossians, which is another heresy. So we go from the Galatian heresy to the Colossian heresy. The Colossian heresy is a Greek heresy, and the Galatian heresy was a Jewish. So we're just working our way through heresies this year. And the Colossians were really into this mysticism and all this stuff. So it's a different set of heresies, but and it's a short book. Before we do, we're going to take a little break. And tonight we're going to look at the story of Gideon, a familiar story. Tell me, what do you know about Gideon? What comes to mind when you hear this name, the story of Gideon in the book of Judges? So what's that, Donna? He went to battle. Good. The fleece. Good. Good. The promise of God to defeat the Midianites. Good.
A weakling?
What's that?
He was a weakling.
He was. Oh, good, good. We're going to get there. Very good. Well, before we start, and I was thinking about Joyce, we're going to watch a Saddleback Kids about Gideon, and then I've got a couple of songs because we have to do a little music with. Have you done Gideon lately? Oh, that's great. Oh, that's wonderful.
Kitty?
Oh. Where's my volume? It was there before. Okay. Oh, wait, I gotta. No, oh, sorry, I'm just gonna do it this way. Hang on. Gonna turn that off. Gonna turn that on. Gonna do that. Where'd those guys go? Oh, there we go. And
There once was a man named Gideon, and he didn't have a lot going on for him. But God had a plan that was bigger than he could ever imagine, so we said amen.
God's people were oppressed by Midian, but God wanted his people to worship him. So God called a man named Gideon to inspire his people to fight again.
Trust in the Lord just like Gideon. With God's help, we can.
okay, that's the one. It's painful as it goes because bunch of young guys beatboxing. It's painful. All right. Okay, we'll do. Oh, this is okay. Donna, you got to sing along with this one.
Brave Gideon had 300 men, the Midianites had a host. But Gideon had the Lord with him, and so he had the most. Gideon had the Lord, Gideon had the Lord. He won the fight with the Midianites, for Gideon had the Lord. Now if you'd be a soldier true and win a full reward, be brave and strong in all you do, and always trust the Lord. Gideon had the Lord, Gideon had the Lord. He won the fight with the Midianites, for Gideon had the Lord.
There you go. That was not AI, by the way. All right, one more, and then we got to watch the. This one is a.
The Lord said unto Gideon, through these 300 men of war, under your command, with swords in the hands, I'll deliver my people from the hands of the Midianites, and all the earth shall see that I am the Lord. Do not be afraid, because your reward is your mind. Break down the altar of Baal and offer your sacrifice. With a sword and a jar in their hands, and a cry of war in their heart, that night they went to fight the Midianites. By the sword of the Lord they flee, by the sword of Gideon they die. sound of war, they all were petrified. 'Cause my reward is my strength, and you, oh Lord, will not reject my sacrifice. So it's like up to you to make the weak strong. In that life you are with me. How can I not overcome? Singing to the Lord, singing to the Lord, 'cause he overcame, took away my shame. Singing to the Lord, singing to the Lord, 'cause he overcame, took away my shame.
Not an AI bot in sight, so this has been good. All right, one last one, and this one's just for Joyce.
Slapstick Theater. Gideon's 300 Men. This is Gideon, who was a judge of Israel. In the time when Gideon lived, a group of people called the Midianites were taking over the Israelites' land. Get out of here! And the Israelites were starving. So the Israelites asked God for help. God chose Gideon to rescue the Israelites and gave him the power to lead an army of Israelites. One day, Gideon and his army got up early and came close to the Midianite camp. God told Gideon that he had too many warriors with him. So God told Gideon to let all the men who were scared go home.
All right, you can go home.
So 22,000 men went home, and Gideon was left with only 10,000. But God told Gideon that he still had too many men with him.
What? Really?
He told Gideon to bring the men down to the water, and that God would give them a test.
Okay.
Gideon did as God asked, and then God said, "Divide the men in two groups. In one group, put all those who cup water in their hands and lap it up with their tongues like dogs. In the other group, put those who kneel down and drink with their mouths in the stream." Only 300 men drank from their hands. God told Gideon, "With these 300 men, I will rescue you and give you victory over the Midianites. Send all the others home." So Gideon did as God said.
You can go home.
That night, God told Gideon to get up and go down to the camp to listen to what the Midianites were saying.
Hey, Purah, let's go.
Gideon and his servant Purah went down to the camp and saw the huge army. There were too many men and camels for Gideon to even count.
Oh, that's like him.
But Gideon heard a soldier telling another man about a dream he had that showed them that God would give Gideon victory over the Midianites. When Gideon heard this, he worshipped God.
Come on.
Then Gideon and his army of 300 men went down to the Midianite camp. They blew their horns and held torches in their hands. They yelled out, and the Midianite soldiers rushed around in a panic and tried to escape. Then God caused the Midianites to start fighting against each other. Because of God's power, Gideon and his army had victory over the Midianites that day.
That is probably what you're the most familiar with. All right. Tonight, we're going to do story time. So I'm going to read you the story. So sit back, grab a coffee, and I'll tell you this story. But before we do that, we've got to do a little bit of background. Story of Gideon is really how Israel ended up in the situation they did, the oppression, and then God gives them the why. So he kind of does the what of the oppression, and then he gives them the why of the oppression, and then the how of their deliverance. So it's a pretty simple story, that grammatically. It's told in 3 acts. There's a prologue saying how. The story of Gideon is Judges 6, all the way to 828. So we get this first of how they were oppressed and why they were oppressed. Then we get Act 1, which is the act you're probably the most familiar with. And that is the story that we just heard with the sticks. And that is God's call to Gideon, Gideon's first act, which was not included in that. And then Gideon defeats the Midianites, which is what the little play had. Then Act 2 is the follow-up after the battle is over, and then Gideon's final revenge. And then the curtain closes on Gideon's life, and there's an epilogue. So it's written in a narrative framework, quite not cleverly, but well written. This just gives you a little bit of the terrain. Israel is about the size of Vancouver Island. So if you look at the top, you'll see the Sea of Galilee, and then you'll see the Jordan River, and then that final little bit of gray at the bottom, that's the tip of the Dead Sea. Jerusalem's kind of over there. So what Gideon was, he gathered troops from around, and the battle was just where the explosion is there, and then he chased them down, and there he encountered the tribe of Ephraim, and that story we'll get into it. Then they crossed the Jordan River, and they run along the shore. You'll see that the fast travel is all along the shore there. If you look at the key on the top, you'll see they run about 40 miles until they cross at Ephraim, and then about another 40 miles in pursuit of the Midianites into the east. So it kind of gives you, so it's about an 80-mile. What's that?
Covered miles.
They did. They covered the miles. Yeah. And that becomes a significant factor in the story. Just a bit of topography. I think that helps us tell the story of it. This is a kind of a topographical map. The darker the color, the higher the elevation, and the lighter the color are more the plains. So you'll see that the Jordan River is in a deep valley, and the Sea of Galilee is at the top, and of course the Dead Sea is well below sea level. The Mediterranean's over here on the Great Sea. And you'll see that when they flee down the Jordan Valley, and there'll come a point when the Edomites, you'll hear it in the text, that they block off the way of escape. Because what's happening is the Midianites are running here, and they could have fled through all these passes. But Gideon wants to trap them, so he gets the Ephraimites to help him, and they block the passes, forcing the Midianites to travel in a narrow valley, which gives them a tactical advantage. And then when they flee to the east, he does the same thing. So the geography plays a point, especially in the part with Ephraim that you'll hear, where Gideon calls them to block the valleys, basically creating a channel for them to run down, and then he can capture them. Otherwise, they disappear, because he wants to totally destroy the army. So that's where Ephraim. That makes sense, how he's trapping them in there? Okay. This is a traditional threshing floor during the time of Gideon. What we see is threshing oxen. The oxen would walk around, and they would throw the wheat up in the air. And what happens? Then the wind catches it, right? So these places are high on hills. You want it to the top of the hill, where the best wind can get them. And they're not overly huge, but they're not small as all. So that gives you a visual image. When Gideon goes into to thresh his grain in the wine press, this is about the size of the wine presses of the era. And wine presses were always in the floor of the valley. Why?
Stay cool.
Stay cool. Very good. Excellent. Yeah. You don't want the wine exposed to bright sun in the shadow. Very good. What else? If you're harvesting great clumps of grapes, do you want to be climbing or descending? So they would go down. So what happens is you can't see it, there's kind of a pipe here, and the grapes, they would stomp on them, and the juice would flow down into the holes and then flow out the pipe. But you can see by the scale of this, it's quite small. So when Gideon is threshing in a wine press, it's a small area, the harvest isn't good. So that just gives you some geographic and imagery, conceptual ideas to go along with the story, so you can visualize it in your mind. All right, well, we're going to skip them. All right. Doug, they did not. Whoops. They just had themselves. All right. All right. Okay. With all that in the background, bit of a set the stage, sit back and let me read you the story. Now, as we read the story, make a little mental checklist of, whoops, I knew that part, or hey, that's new to me. Because we'll discuss the hey, that's new to me parts. I feel like I should be wearing a sweater. Get the rocking chair out. Oh, by the way, Moses married a Midianite. That helps the story. That will go into a part of the story. The Midianites were a tribe on the east of the Jordan, and they began to make systematic raids on Jewish settlements. Sound familiar? They would burn the houses and fields, kill all the people, and make off with the produce of the land. These raids were especially serious during the harvest season. The people became impoverished and lived in eternal dread of these barbaric hordes from the east. This sad condition lasted for 7 years. And so, in trembling and despair, the Israelites prayed to God for rescue, and again he sent a deliverer. There dwelt in Ophrah, in the city of Manasseh, a man by the name of Gideon, the son of Joash, the Abi-Ezrite. His brothers had been put to death on Mount Tabor by the Midianites. Now put that in your memory bank. Gideon's brothers had been killed by the Midianites on Mount Tabor. That's going to come back to be a central part of the story and a central motivation for Gideon's behavior. But even this family, Gideon's, was tainted by idolatry. For Joash, his father, had in his house an altar for Baal, with a tree consecrated to the Asherite by its side, where he and his family worshipped. Gideon alone remained uncorrupted by the evil influences that surrounded him, and adhered unswervingly to the service of God. One day, while threshing some threshing some ripe corn near the winepress to hide from the Midianites. That's what's going on. He's threshing there. The yield was small and the harvest was even smaller. An angel of the Lord appeared to him and greeted him with the words, "The Lord is with thee, mighty man of valor." What do you think? Was the angel being sarcastic or optimistic, or telling Gideon something he didn't know yet? That's a curious one. But Gideon answered, "Oh, my Lord, if the Lord be with us, why then has all this befallen us? And where are all his miracles of which our fathers told us? And now the Lord has forsaken us and delivered us into the hands of the Midianites." What does that statement tell you about Gideon? A little cynical. What else might be tell us about him? A little whiny. Okay, good. Maybe a little honest. God, we heard about all this stuff, but there were, what's going on here? So either way, it's interesting. What also tells us that he's willing to argue with God. Yeah. "Go in this thy might," rejoined the angel, "and thou shalt save Israel from the hands of the Midianite. Indeed, I have sent thee." These words fell on a wondering ear. Yet willing to accept the great mission, he asked for some sign to assure him that he had indeed heard a message from God. Entreating the angel to stay, he hurried into the house, and when he returned, he brought the meat of a young goat. How long does it take to butcher a goat? I don't know, an hour? With unleavened cakes of flour and a pot of broth. So he's got meat, unleavened cakes of flour, and a pot of broth. But the angel, declining to taste it, requested Gideon to lay the meat and the unleavened cakes upon the stone and to pour out the broth. Who does this sound like? Put the meat on the stone and pour water on it. Very similar to Elijah. As this was done, the angel touched the food with the end of his staff, and fire rose up out of the rock and consumed the meat and cakes. And then Gideon felt that he had truly stood in the presence of the angel of the Lord. What's the next thing we notice about Gideon? Obedience, good. What else? Service. Recognize. Yeah, he also wanted proof. This is the first sign Gideon asks. Gideon gets his first sign. Sometimes we jump ahead to the fleece, but Gideon's been asking for signs the entire time. So, you're right. In the silent hours of the night, the divine voice came again to Gideon, bidding him cut down the altar of Baal, together with the tree of the Asherite, which polluted his father's house. He was then to build an altar of God, upon which he was to offer the young bull as a burnt offering, using the sacrifice of the wood of the destroyed idol. Aided by 10 servants, Gideon executed this daring scheme by night. In the morning, when the deed was discovered, the men of Ophrah, full of rage, searched for the perpetrator. They discovered and convicted Gideon. They surrounded the house of Joash and exclaimed angrily, Bring out your son that he may die, because he has destroyed the altar of Baal, and because he has cut down the tree of the Asherite that was by it. Joash, anxious to rescue his brave son, also knowing that his other sons had been killed by the Midianites, answered shrewdly, "Will you fight for Baal? If he be a god, let him fight for himself, since someone has destroyed his altar." By this reply, he silenced the incensed multitude, and Gideon received a new name, Jerubbaal. That is, let Baal fight against him. So this is Jerubbaal, his new name. In the meantime, the Midianites, together with the Amalekites and the other tribes, were gathering a huge army in the valley of Jezreel. Gideon also mobilized an army, 32,000 from the tribes of Manasseh, Asher, Zebulun, and Naphtali. All right, what does that tell you about Gideon? Is that Joyce?
He had power.
He did. He had power. Yeah. Despite being from this tiny tribe, he was a man of influence, right? Not everybody cries out and 32,000 people come following you, right? Knowing full well there's a massive army of Midianites and Amalekites and others against you. So Gideon is not a man without influence. He's a man of recognized authority. And so when he calls, the army comes to him and they go with him to fight this huge army. But in order to encourage his soldiers, Gideon once again asked for a sign that the battle they were going to fight would be won. He placed a sheep's fleece on the ground. He said to God, if the wool becomes saturated with the dew while the earth remained dry, he would know that God was with him. What's going on here? What should happen? Everything should get wet, right?
He should also just
What's it?
he should also
Just have obeyed. And so this happened. Demanding further proof, Gideon then begged that the wool would be dry and the ground around it wet with dew. He reverses it. And what does God do?
he humors.
He humors him. He makes accommodation. And be curious to know God's tone. Yes, Gideon, we don't know. The next morning again, he found this granted. Without exception, all now recognize Gideon's leadership. In a further prophecy, Gideon was now informed that the army that he had raised, 32,000, was too large. Was not the victory to come by way of a miracle? A conventional military victory by Gideon and his army would have inevitably reinforced the Jews' misconception about their own power. Consequently, the Almighty orchestrated a kind of victory that would force the people to recognize that success depends not upon physical strength or military strategy, but on the divine hand of God. An order was thereupon sent throughout the ranks that all those who feared the clans of the arms were permitted to leave. Can you imagine? So if you're afraid, run away. 22,000 men went home. There were then 10,000 men still left. This number was considered by God to be still too large. Gideon then put his men to the test. He took them all down by the river to drink. Of all the men, only 300 drank water by bringing water up to their mouths with their hands. The rest got down on their knees and lapped the water like dogs. Now, in traditional Jewish thinking, this is a statement that they were idolatrous because they fall down into the water. This is a symbol of their willingness to bow. That's not in the text. That's an interpretation of the text. Gideon retained 300 men, sending all the rest home. With his small army, he set out to wage war against an army of 135,000. 300 to 135,000, the odds are against it. That night, Gideon was again assured of God by an overwhelming victory. 2 signs, now he gets a third. With his armor bearer, he stole softly into the enemy's camp and overheard a conversation between 2 Midianites. One of them had a strange dream. A cake of barley rolled down through the camp of Midian, striking one of the tents with such force that the tent completely collapsed. His companion interpreted this to mean a victory for the Jewish forces under Gideon. Returning to camp, Gideon roused his men and put before them the plan of action. So far the story, probably familiar, right? All right, we're getting to the unfamiliar part. He divided his men into 3 groups of 100 each. The strategy he used was that of a cattle rustler who wishes to stampede a herd of cattle. They surrounded the camp, each one bearing a horn, an empty pitcher, and a torch. The torch was to be concealed in the pitcher until the action began. Gideon attacked when the enemy had retired for the night, just on the changing of the guard. So those who are going to the camp are tired, and those who are getting up are still partly asleep. The night watch had just changed. Breaking the pitchers and thus disclosing the flaming torches. By the way, if you have a torch in one hand and a trumpet in the other hand, what have you no hand for? A sword. Thus disclosing the flaming torches, the Jews blew the shofar, the horns, and cried, "For God and Gideon, the sword of the Lord and Gideon." With torches on their left hands and horns in their right, they maintained their positions around the camp, shouting and blowing the trumpets. The deafening din of the trumpets aroused the sleeping Midianites, and the blazing torches alarmed them. The outer troops ran to the middle. Utter confusion ran in their camps, seized with panic and seeing troops rushing towards them. Without attempting the slightest resistance, they turned to flight, attacked one another, sped on madly in the darkness, in hoping of gaining the fords of the Jordan. Remember where they are? They're looking for the fords of Jordan, and thus reaching the desert or some friendly tribe in safety. This is the point now where they start chasing them down the Jordan River, that first 40-mile run. Fierce was the chase through the Holy Land. Gideon sent his speedy messengers all through the mountains to the tribe of Ephraim. Remember, they're just south. Bidding the people occupy at once the passes of the Jordan and so cut off the retreats from the Midianites. The men of Ephraim promptly obeyed the command and caused a terrible massacre at the fords of the Jordan. They also captured 2 Midianite princes, Oreb and Zeb, slew them, and brought their heads as trophies to Gideon. We now enter perhaps the unfamiliar part of the story. But the men of Ephraim felt aggrieved, angry, that they should not have been summoned sooner to share in the glory of the victory, or to share in what? What would 135,000 men in a camp have? Loot. More, remember?
Oh, there's camels?
A lot of loot. And Ephraim had been deprived of the loot. It was Gideon's tribe. Civil war was on the edge. Gideon wisely answered and averted this civil. "What have I done," he replied, "in comparison with you? Is not the gleaning of the grapes of Ephraim better than the vintage of my tribe? Didn't you win a bigger battle than I have?" He's being a bit self-effacing. "God has delivered unto you the hands of the princes of Midian, Oreb and Zeb. And what was I able to do in comparison with you?" Well, actually, he was able to do a lot more, but he's very tactful. What does this tell us about Gideon? He's no fool. Remember, his father was wise. He's his father's son. "Isn't your victory greater than mine?" And thus the Ephraimites were satisfied. Now Gideon and his 300 men continued their pursuit of the enemy. Remember, they've been up all night long. They've run 40 miles. They raced eastward, anxious to capture the Midianite kings of Zebah and Zalmunna. Arriving at the city of Succoth, they begged for bread to satisfy their hunger. But the men of Succoth answered haughtily, "Dost thou hold Zebah and Zalmunna already in thy hands, that we should give bread to the army?" Why wouldn't they help them? They don't know if the battle's been won yet. They're hedging their bets. "Well, Gideon, it seems like you're winning, but you could easily lose, so no." Because if they offered to help the Gideon and Gideon lost, then the Midianites would come back and slaughter them. Gideon, who didn't take these things lightly, swore to take revenge if he should return victorious, and passed on with his hungry followers. He arrived at Penuel, the city with the great tower, and he repeated his request for bread, and was just as heartlessly refused, and threatened similar retribution. "I shall take down this tower." Meanwhile, Zebah and Zalmunna, remember them? They had rallied at Kakor, the remnant of their army, consisting of 15,000 men. Gideon was still grossly outnumbered and had run 80 miles. Eager to crush Gideon and his handful of followers. But the Hebrews, incited by despair and fighting for their existence, or so we would hold, surprised the hostile camp at the unguarded hour. The army was routed and put to flight. Gideon dashed off in pursuit of the 2 kings, and there captured them. He returned to Succoth, summoned the elders of the town, 77 in number, and told them to look at the royal captives. He then carried out his fearful threat and put the elders to death. all 77. He then fell upon the town of Peniel and slew all the inhabitants. Zebah and Zalmunna were then brought before him. The moment had arrived for fulfilling what Gideon's sacred duty. It was time for revenge. What manner of men, he asked the captives, were those you slew at Tabor? Remember, who did they slew? His brothers. They promptly replied, as thou art, so were they. Each one resembled the child of a king. Gideon exclaimed, they were my brothers, the sons of my mothers. As the Lord lives, if you had saved them alive, I would not slay you. What's not in my notes, but in the text, is Gideon gets a young man to kill them. He attempts to. And they basically cry out and say, to be slain at the hand of a child is an insult, and the boy doesn't. So Gideon actually himself kills them, avenging the murder of his brothers, and the war was over. Probably not part of the story you're familiar with. We're almost done. This was the end of the Midianite rule over the Jews. Gideon's heroism was fully appreciated. For the first time in Jewish history, the Jews offered Gideon a crown. He would be king. And his sons were to have the right of succession. But he refused, saying, God will rule over you. He survived his glorious victories 33 years, a happy and peaceful time for the Israelites. And when he died at a great age, he was buried in the grave of his ancestors, mourned by a grateful nation. But there's one more part of this story, one more sad ending. Gideon took 50 pounds of gold from the Midianites and made a golden garment, an ephod, a robe of gold, and placed it in his hometown. Now, there was an ephod already from Moses' time, but it was away in Bethel, and this way his family wouldn't have to travel. They could worship at home. The people did come and worship there, but it became an idol to them, a snare to Gideon and his household. And Gideon lived like a king despite not taking the title. He had a harem of many wives and had 70 sons. He had one son whom he named, My Father is King, a name used by many Philistine kings, similar to the Egyptian word Pharaoh. So despite not being a king, he said to his son, your father's a king, lived like one with his harem and his wealth. His reign of righteousness ultimately was short. When he died, Israel returned to worship the Baals. The sons of Israel did not remember the Lord their God, who had saved them from their hands of all kinds of enemy on every side, nor did they show kindness to the household of Jerubbaal, that is Gideon, in accordance with all the good that he had done to Israel. All right, that is the story. Where's my last page of notes? Sorry, I'm missing a page of notes, but that's okay. I'll do it from memory. So, oh, wait, what's this here? My last page of notes. How do you approach the story of Gideon? And what was new here?
The whole having the young boy kill and not like it's actually a very realistic type scenario, right? It's not so picturesque and I don't know how you say it, but I want him to do it. Well, he didn't do it, so he did it himself. And you can just see some realism in that.
Well, yeah, the young boy being ordered to kill 2 kings and going, I don't think I can do that. For a variety. We don't know the boy's motivation, but for a boy to kill a king would be
It just says he was afraid.
Yeah, he's afraid to kill the kings. Why? The basis of his fear, we don't know. Good. What did you think of Gideon killing everybody in Peul and Succoth?
He told him.
He did.
If I knew anything about raising children, say you're going to.
So you're saying he's consistent?
Angry. I said I could kill him. You get bread? I'm hungry.
That's one way of looking at it. Good.
They were rejecting God in a way.
Those two villages, they rejected God.
Listen, they were hedging their bets, right? And yeah, yeah, they're saying, well, we don't see kings with you. Let's see how this plays out. Yeah, good.
I didn't know his name.
Yeah, he's Jerubbaal. Yeah, or Jerubbaal. Yeah. Let Baal contend with him. Good. We approach the story in a variety of ways. That's why I showed you the different videos, right? For children, we approach the story very simplistically. We don't tell them, and Gideon killed them all, and then Gideon killed them, and then Gideon cut their head off. Then Gideon took a bunch of wives, had 70 sons, and became, we tell the story of courage, right? Of faithfulness, of obedience. We tell the big story. The story of Gideon is one of three parallel stories within the scripture of Moses, Deborah, and Gideon as types and shadows of Jesus. Deborah is a type of Moses. There's a lot of parallels between Gideon and Moses. Some are broader than others, and some are rather specific. The broadest one is that Israel's oppressed, right? Egyptians, Midianites, in the sense that Israel had gone into exile under the Midianites or the oppression of that. Moses is in exile. He's out in the wilderness tending goats. Gideon is in exile, hiding on the threshing floor, doing his corn. Moses is married to a Midianite, so there's a bit of a tie in there. Moses says, I cannot go for I cannot speak. And then Gideon in chapter 6:15 says that he is not qualified because he's from the smallest tribe. So both Gideon and Moses try and back out of their call to be the deliverers of Israel. And God uses, despite both their weaknesses, he says, I will be with you. So there's a similarity there. While Moses had the promise of assistance, Gideon doesn't. So that's where the parallel breaks down. Both are called to spiritually and materially lead their people. Moses leads them to Mount Zion, where they receive the law. Gideon leads them to the mountain and delivers them from the Midianites there as well. Both defeat pagan gods. Moses, through the series of plagues we saw in Sunday school that time, defeats the gods. So too, Gideon defeats Baal and the Asherahs here. Both are threatened by their own countrymen, Moses when he slays, and then Gideon by his father's family. Both request signs. Moses in Exodus 4, verses 1 through 9, looks for a sign, and Gideon looks for, we saw tonight, the three signs that he has. Both are commissioned to lead Israel out of captivity. In both their calls, there's angelic intervention and assistance along with it. You could even argue that both had a staff in the story. I think that's pretty weak. Both have fire. And again, there's a little bit there. I'm not going to lean too heavily on that. Both are involved in manual labor. Gideon's harvesting, and so is Moses looking after sheep. And what's interesting, even perhaps most significant, they both have fleeces. There you go. Good. Another one. Most significantly is that the word to send that's used in Exodus 3:10 and Judges 6:14 is the same word. So God sends, commissions using the same language. So as Moses was sent by God, so too Gideon is sent by God to rescue Egypt. So there's some parallels there. So that's one way of looking at the story. This is a Jewish story, the story of the deliverance of Israel. Once more, in the cycle of Judges that we see throughout, this is another one of those stories. So in the broadest sense, this is the story. It's the transition point from Moses and the law to later on having a king. And this is the first time Israel asks for a king. We're getting those seeds of that, where they say, Gideon, come be our king. Later on, they'll say that to with Saul, right? So we're getting a foretaste of that, a little hint of that. How do we use Gideon when we tell stories? That's the big, there's a lot more detail I've given you, but how do we express Gideon with people? What do we focus on?
Being outnumbered.
Being outnumbered, yeah. So if God's on your side, don't worry about it.
Being correctly.
Yep.
Saying that we need to test all sorts of things to see if God's telling us.
Yes, the fleece thing gets a lot of traction. What they don't get is the angel making cake.
Right.
I'm waiting for an angel to light up a rock. Yeah. That'd be pretty cool.
That it's like the angel, Jesus, if we say the angel Lord,
yeah, it's a theophany.
Fire burst out of a rock and goes, yeah, I'm going to need a sign.
I know.
Are you serious? And God would grant, like it's just, but to see this and I think, how did that look here again? He did all these things, and it wasn't, I don't think that was for Gideon,
No.
but that was for God to demonstrate that was a sign for God for his people, not for Gideon.
Yes. It's broad.
Really establish the fact that this is God's show.
Yeah. And Gideon, despite the number of miracles, does get, in the end, he fails. You know, he becomes what he attempts to do. The ephod of gold becomes a snare to his household and to the people.
You can see all the wives way back, like you king. You know, these guys, they shouldn't have.
Yeah,
and that's horses they shouldn't have.
Exactly, and he has 70 sons.
So,
He grows wealthy through this, right? You got to remember, this is an army with camels more than the eye can see. Gideon is very wealthy. He lives like a king. He has great wealth. He has a harem. He has a large family, and his son is called "Your father is the king." So Gideon may have not taken the title, but let's face it, he took the benefits. Good. All right. There's a strange thing. This story is not about Gideon. Who's the story about?
Jesus.
Jesus. Yes, that's right, Doug. This story is about God. We often focus on Gideon in the story. It's actually about God being patient with Gideon. It's about God delivering his people. It's about God doing the miraculous. It's about God making accommodation. We often kind of go, oh, this is stories about, well, no, it's actually not about. There is one other factor, as we're going to draw this to a close pretty quick. This is a very human story. There's a great humanity. Scripture never pulls punches on its characters. It shows their flaws. It isn't like these old mythological stories, of how, no, Gideon is revealed to be a very flawed human. So I have a list of flaws that I'm going to read. Feel free to add any and see where I got it wrong or throw in. First off, Gideon is a man with doubt. I need a sign. God, could you give me a sign? Could you give me a sign? I don't know. There's uncertainty in, right? Gideon certainly is a man of fear. I'll do this at night. And he's a man but he's also a man who draws people around him. We don't want to discredit that. He's a man who has awareness of how small he is. I'm from the smallest tribe. Now, that could be him deflecting, saying, well, don't pick me, or it could be genuine. He is certainly a man lived in a world of idolatry. He himself was not idolatrous, but lived in an idolatrous world. He is a man who knows poverty. Right? He's threshing in a wine press. They've been under attack. He's a man who knows oppression. They've been under the hands of the Midianites for decades. He's a man who needs constant reassurance. He is a man who knows war. He takes an army with him. He's a man who's known famine. Excuse me. He's also known death in his family. That's part of the story we don't often factor in, that the story of the Midianites begins with a backlog of the Midianites killing his brothers. We don't know how many brothers he had, but we do know, and I think if I was to make this a movie, that would be a driving factor in his motivation, right? Because it comes into play later on when he says to them, those boys you killed on the mountain.
My name is Inigo Montoya.
Yeah. Did you, what were they like? And they go, you can almost see them going, oh, they were just like you.
Oh.
Yeah, exactly. Like, oh, what have we done?
Yeah.
And Gideon says, had you spared them, you would live today. And they go, oh, I guess that means we're not going to live today. It's a great moment, and it's a part of the story. Yeah, we did. Yeah. What were they like? They had you spared them. I can't do it very well. I can't do a Russell Crowe, but this sense, I think that's part of it. And again, motives of suffering, I don't want to read into it, but I find it fascinating that at the beginning and the end of the story is the death of his brothers. And I suspect that was part of his motivating factor. So the death of his brothers was a lot. This loss is part of his story. And this long, I believe, for revenge. But
you look at a lot of them as not God. That is not.
Oh,
there's a lot in there, like, nope, that, I know, I get it.
And then you get anger, right? Gideon's an angry man, and they're afraid of him because he's angry at them, right? He's also angry at the people of Succoth, and if you don't feed us, we're going to come back and kill you all. Like, that's a little over the top, Gideon. Yeah, like, would you say, well, if you don't feed us, we're going to come back and take the food or steal your camels, right? But he says, no, we're just going to kill all of you. Okay, it's a bit extreme, but All right. And again, we're reading it with 21st century eyes. It's a complete injustice to the story. So let me ask you two questions as we wrap up. Knowing what you know now about the story, under what circumstance would you use the story of Gideon in conversation or counsel or care? What situation do you think this is a perfect time to tell that person about Gideon?
God doesn't work perfect.
Good. Yeah. It's a story of some degree of comfort. By the way, these are some sermon titles that I found about Gideon. How to Trust. Gideon, from fearful to fearless to forgetful. Faithful to fearless Gideon. What God can do with a few. The Good Fight of Faith. Ordinary to extraordinary. Gideon goes from obscurity to leader of Israel. The story of Gideon illustrates God's sovereignty over our troubles. And last, from living small to leading strong, the weak man made strong.
Going through the details, but where does this idea that he was a little weakly come from? Like, that's not in there.
It's not in the story.
I'm the youngest of my father's tribe, and you're the least of the tribes. Like, that's.
By the way, who else said that? David, yeah. And we've never attribute that to David.
Said weakly, and I kind of, that, yeah, I've heard that, but looking through this, like, there's nothing in there saying that he's weak. I mean, they call him valiant warrior. We assume that's sarcasm, and there's nothing to say to the contrary.
And 30,000 men followed him. Yeah, so there is some indication that he was a man of renown.
Could be that some things that have swayed the church tradition and culture that just simply aren't rooted in fact.
Absolutely.
Things happen.
Yeah, it does. So, under what circumstance would you use this story? Comfort.
Trust and faithfulness for sure.
Okay.
Encouragement. It's okay.
Yeah. All right, let me ask one last question. If you were asked to give a devotional on Gideon, so here's the event, whatever the event, and they said, could you give us 10 minutes on Gideon? What would you focus on? In other words, how would you approach this story? This all goes back to my exploring, you approach it. How would you approach the story if you're asked to give a devotional on Gideon? Now, I was going to divide you up into tables, but we don't have time, and make you come up with a devotional, but we won't do that to you.
I know the direction I take in a ministry.
Okay, give me a for instance.
Like being faithful, feeling inadequate, and what's the word, Shelley? What's the word? Feeling disqualified because of failure and things like that, right? Because of doubt or whatever else. Saying, well, I'm not fit for God to use me, or things like that. And the fact that it's not us who works, it's God.
Yeah.
That reliance on Him, trust in Him, His power, not our own.
Yeah.
It shows God's power, though, when He picks people who screw up. Like if you pick some perfect person, it just says more when you pick someone who's messed up.
Yeah, absolutely done.
Reminds me of me then, right?
Yeah, and that's the touch point for all of us, right? We got to go, okay, maybe I don't like Gideon the whole way, but I understand that feeling of I'm not capable, and God saying, if I was to tell the story, I would call it, it's not about you. This story is about God. And when I read it, I kept reminding myself, this isn't Gideon's story. Gideon's in the story. This is God's story. And I would shift the focus. Say, very often we think we're what they call it, main character syndrome. We think we're the star of our own show. And God says, you're not actually.
Oftentimes I read stories like this, then you look and it reminds me of working with my boys. And it's like, I want you to be part of what I'm doing, but golly, it'd be so much easier if I just did it myself.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? It's just like, well, how do I know that? Just do as I'm asking you. Just trust me. Well, how do I know that's going to work? Give me a sign.
Yeah.
Get out of my way. I'll do it in fingers.
God didn't need Gideon. He could have stampeded the camels because there's tens of thousands of camels, right? Chose to use Gideon. All right, that's the story of Gideon. Take some time this week to read Colossians. It's very short. Pick it up next week.